So today I'd like to talk a little bit about the recent developments in Hong Kong, and it's particularly in the area of energy efficiency in existing buildings, what opportunities these might represent to you, and how these opportunities might develop over time. So what I'm aiming to achieve today is a perspective from an energy efficiency consultancy on the current incentives in the market, how I believe these will develop, and most importantly, help you to make money for you personally or for your company. So a lot of research has been done on why energy efficiency projects do not get implemented. If you look at the business case, it seems to be a no-brainer. So essentially what they seem to boil down to is three main factors. The first one is visibility. Where are the energy management opportunities and how do I access them? Incentives, these might be government-led incentives or subsidy programs. And financing, so whether it's internal or external financing, energy efficiency projects need to be financed in order to. So when we arrived in Hong Kong to start up Energens in 2009, we looked around and thought, wow, this town is an absolute gold mine for opportunities for energy efficiency. You just have to go down to Causeway Bay, feel the air-conditioned air blowing out of beautiful warm buildings on a summer day, or go out and watch the light show every night to realise there's a lot of opportunity in town. We had a little bit of experience in Australia with the energy efficiency markets. And in Hong Kong, with larger buildings, more energy, more expensive tariffs, and seemingly less competition, what could possibly be? 5 years later, we built a team that conducted energy audits in over 200 sites throughout Southeast Asia, with some battle stories from the trenches of energy efficiency and existing buildings. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the incentives that have been put in place over the last 5 years and what they've done for energy efficiency in existing buildings. Firstly, the government implemented the CO2 reduction targets. From our point of view, this did very little for existing buildings energy efficiency in Hong Kong as the major utilities switch their fuel mix. Secondly, the Buildings Energy Efficiency Ordinance we were very excited about because it meant that every commercial building in Hong Kong would have to have energy work conducted. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that the results have been as good as maybe had been expected in terms of real energy reductions that commercial buildings are experiencing in Hong Kong as a result of this ordinance. However, it has been a really good instigator for those companies who wanted to do something. It was at least a starting point. Thirdly, the subsidy programs, so there's minimal subsidy programs. We've got the Carbon Smart Water Pilot Funds and the Clean Production Partnership Program. There are some minimal subsidies available for energy audits, carbon audits. And then fourthly, I wanted to put up there design-led green rating systems because I think it's, I wanted to differentiate these because I think that there's a lot of, I think they're often put in the same category, often mistakenly, with being Hong Kong and lead as primarily design rating systems, which don't really seem to look at the performance of the building year on year and how that improves over time. So what has this actually achieved for energy efficiency in the existing buildings market in Hong Kong? Well, I'd say something has been achieved, but I'd like to look at three different scenarios and how this might play out over the coming, say, 5 years. I've got three different scenarios. First one, it's quite, Avery Lovins was in town a couple of weeks ago, the founder of modern energy efficiency, I guess, the Rocky Mountain Institute, very, very outspoken, and he kind of coined this term megawatts. So what he was talking about is in Europe there's a company called E.ON where they basically spun off an energy efficiency department that had incentives efficiency, for getting energy efficiency. So say they went to a client and they saved them $10, they get $1 back. So what is currently happening is you have the large utilities, CLP and Electric, have energy audit teams who do energy audits. But they really don't have any incentive to save energy due to the fact that if they save any energy, it really comes off their bottom line. So this scenario is where Hong Kong spins up CLP and or Hong Kong Electric spin off energy efficiency companies, separate companies, and standalone, and actually are rewarded for producing megawatts. Scenario 2, status quo, so no major changes. In this scenario, there are still some really great investment scenarios available for property owners who want to reduce their operating costs through more efficient operation. This either through investment in their own assets or through utilising one of the many energy investment funds that have been established in recent years specifically to finance energy efficiency opportunities. Now, if I was to say to you, if you put $100 into a pool of average energy efficiency investments, your return would be $37 or $8 per year every year. Would you invest in it? Because that is the net result of, if we look at all of our projects, over 200 energy audits over the last 5 years, that's essentially the business case that's on the table. So if you would prefer not to, if you prefer to invest in a new shopping mall or something else that you think would give greater returns, there are companies like SDCL, who's got energy efficiency and RX, set up in recent years, and they're actually very happy to come and invest in these projects. So that's kind of the status quo. There's still investment opportunities there. So the third scenario is that Hong Kong implements something more performance-based. So in Singapore, they have the Greenmax system for chiller performance rating, where it's essentially a year-on-year rating system for all the chillers in Singapore. The idea is that you get rated on your chiller performance compared to the benchmark of all the other chillers in Singapore, and every year that benchmark gets the bar gets rated essentially, so you're always striving to become more efficient on a year-on-year basis. Now, I don't know whether the Hong Kong Green Council will implement something like this within the next 4 years. I have heard that they are thinking about splitting beam Hong Kong for existing buildings into separate chunks. So you've got the 7 categories that make up Hong Kong beam for existing buildings. You might be able to, in the future, apply for just the energy part, and over time increase your rating based on benchmarks. So that would be quite interesting to see. Most importantly, what is in all of this for an investor? Finance. There's several ways in investing you can look at it. You can look at it, but mostly what I want to focus on is if you want to invest in commercial property or funds that own commercial property, or you can invest directly in an energy efficiency fund. So the next section relates to these. All of these energy efficiency opportunities are like golden nuggets. They're lying within your facilities waiting to be unearthed. So the historical tragedy of energy efficiency is that in the past, most of these nuggets were invisible. And just in the way in gold mining, in the past, a lot of it was through trial and error sampling. Now you've got 3D modeling of geological deposits. The same technology, the same principle can get applied to your energy management. So making those virtual gold deposits in your building visible through creating rules, alerts, and alarms that indicate that systems are out of sync, and where there's anomalies and where opportunities lie to save you money. So as an investor, where would you put your money? Would you put it into a mining company that employs the old methods or the new ones? Would you put it into a property owner that deploys the old methods? So to this end, I've been helped immensely by a recent study by Rob Bauer and Nelson Koch from the Institute of Business and Economic Research at the University of Berkeley. They've built up a global real estate sustainability benchmark that measures the implementation performance of funds globally, both in management and policy, green talk, and implementation and measurement, which is green walk. So the quote here, if investors cannot directly measure directly the energy savings of lighting people retrofits, then they are not likely to install more energy efficient lighting in a client's environmental management system. Rings true. So I guess the key takeaway from this slide is that what often happens as part of an energy efficiency program is you do an energy audit, energy consumption might fall, then over time gradually drifts back up. So through implementing a continuous monitoring system, you can essentially alert and alarm when those energy opportunities are going out of sync and react in real time and keep driving down energy consumption. So how do we know that environmental performance is positively correlated with financial performance? Essentially, another quote from Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, looking at all the different real estate funds out there and their sustainability performance. And then here's basically just some of the global environmental leaders and how they stack up. But I think this table here is quite illuminating in terms of, we've got here how many companies are actually doing something environmental factor in that area. And you've got Asia down the bottom here that has a percentage of the sample with smart means 21%. Again, that's something that's quite a key factor for driving energy efficiency opportunities. Implementing smart energy dashboards. How do you know how much energy is wasted if it's not being monitored? And then this is, I thought this was a very interesting slide also. There's some private property funds that do have higher ratings. These are the ones that have been rated by the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark in 2014. And even though you've got Goodman Group, Goodman Hong Kong Logistics Fund, it's actually, it's a parent company, it's an Australian company, so they're essentially implementing what they have already in Australia, which is really being driven by government legislation. This is quite worrying because as this graph shows, you can see how much building stock will be constructed in Asia in the coming years and how much CO2 emissions are increasing in the region as a result of this. So I think a step change needs to happen around energy efficiency and performance. So in conclusion, I guess the main things that I want to get across today is that the leading academics agree it's the most important barriers to getting energy efficiency done. Visibility on environmental metrics. And I think this is the number one factor. And you can see how new technologies make these opportunities visible. Incentives. Okay, there is a lot of talk about improving the incentive environment, but the business case already is there. And financing. I already touched upon. Financing is there where there is external financing, or the business case is quite good on an internal finance basis also. So that I'd like to open up for questions.
Thank you very much. Gilbert, thank you very much. I certainly found that very interesting and very illuminating, and not the entirely positive story as regards Hong Kong. But I guess your answer to that would be, well, that means that's lots of opportunity. But why don't you just say a bit, sorry, I should be opening up to questions and answers, but I'll go to you first. So, you cite the example of property developers in Hong Kong, who are they're not normally short to extract maximum value from a proposition. If is such evident good sense in the way that you portrayed it, what are the barriers you see in Hong Kong, to the extent of public life, business and so on? What are the barriers to adopting this sort of approach?
Well, there are a lot of barriers, but I think that they're easily overcome. So, I think that there's not a huge amount of awareness of the amount of money that's on the table. I think that a lot of property developers aren't really incentivized to save energy. If they have a tenanted building, they can basically farm out the energy cost to a lot of their tenants. That's the majority of it. So it's really what's the frustrating thing is that most of our clients that have had a lot of success with own and operate their own facilities. The majority of the property developers in Hong Kong either sell or lease a lot of their space out. So you have a lot of separate owners of the energy bill, if you like. So that would be the primary thing.
May I follow on from that and say I think that's one of the key problems in Hong Kong, is it not? Because the developers are actually selling on the buildings, so they may know the benefits, but they don't actually have any incentive to actually pass these benefits on. So I think that there are quite a lot of really interesting discussions going on about green leases or incentives in terms of leasing and so forth. And I think that there are many things that we could think about in terms of helping the community, maybe through chamber committees and so forth, in getting this understanding a little bit more widely disseminated, that there are benefits. Actually, there are lots of studies as well that have now been undertaken that show in Manhattan or other places where you can actually get higher rents if your buildings are energy efficient and so forth. So evidence-based discussions are really important. I was actually going to ask you, if you had a magic wand, or if you were in government, say you were in government, what would be the first three things in the short term that you would do to fix the problem? Because clearly indicated that there are issues, there are problems in moving forward, and the scenarios are not necessarily positive. What would be the first two things?
The first thing I would do would be implement a performance rating system for the commercial buildings of Hong Kong. And the second thing would be I would make that maybe not mandatory, make it voluntary, but every year you'd have to maintain that performance rating system. So I think the perfect example is in Australia with the National Australian Built Environment Rating System, where they have annual, basically an annual audit of the energy consumption. You can split it up, and that's why I was talking about being Hong Kong for existing buildings. If they split it up between energy, water, waste, you can actually look at it on an annual basis and see, okay, we're going down in terms of our energy consumption performance, or whether it's going up. Because the frustrating thing, I think, is that there are green building design rating systems, buildings that are being built that have very good green design ratings, but over time, what's happening with that building? Because you can have an old building that's retro-commissioned and commissioned very well, that's a lot more efficient than the LEED platinum building next door. So I think that there's a little bit of mushing them together in terms of green building designs and existing buildings. But those would be the two things. How the Neighbours program works is they had a voluntary program where every building could rate themselves against the Neighbours benchmark, and then basically 40% of the buildings in Australia were voluntarily rated. So the government said, okay, we've got 40% now, let's roll it out for the rest of the country. It's been very successful. In Singapore, they've done a similar thing with their Green Mark program for chiller performance. They focus just on the chiller market without going specific.
And was the chiller part focused on because that's the most highest energy demand on building projects?
Question.
Yeah. Gilbert, thank you very much for this overview. And I'm getting the chance to talk about something interesting. I'm from the Hong Kong science park, and we're implementing these green lasers. And you know that for the green lasers, we have 2 meters now. One is for power, one is for the water that is going to go into the air conditioning chilling system. But we have also a CLP meter, right? And all this is perceived by customers as something complex and a waste of time. And then the meter we buy is something that was really expensive, no mention the brand. How should we drive simplification on this? Are policies important? Why the utilities here are so behind? Utilities in Hong Kong are in the 19th century. Why is this? Sorry, I'm Italian and I don't want to be critical about the legacy of this, but why is this? What should we do? As you know, here I feel that there is also, it's the right environment to think about what kind of push we can do to the public opinion on this matter, right? What should we do?
I think that's a good question. New York, I believe, have implemented compulsory tenant metering for large living space. So that could be a very good example that Hong Kong can take on and have a look at. I know that Barbara in DC, Resource Defence Council, and it's part of the British Chamber, but she's been pushing that quite hard in Hong Kong. So we could take lessons from that experience as Hong Kong and see how that might be applicable. It seems crazy that there's 3 meters for every tenancy. I agree. So why doesn't the CLP a smart meter just from the start where you can extract data out?
Comment or a question?
Yeah, I could comment on instead that we 2011 I was actually in Science Park for Indonesia, and then 11, right, the American guy with the megawatts.
Yes.
Yeah, he was there, and there was a big panel discussion. And there were 3 things there. One was they showed Nathan Road, Mongkok, right next to XE, the MTR, and the funny thing was it said Hong Kong 2020, and I asked why 2020? It could be 2002 if you just go to Europe. You know, every big city, Milan, London, has congestion charge and so on. Then of course, it's a matter of policy. But of course, in Hong Kong, the belief is that taxation leads to government involvement, and also it's bad. But actually, it's incentivizing economic behavior, and you can actually, by avoiding tax, you can be cheaper, right? So believing in that kind of regulatory framework, that's the first problem. Second problem was London was going, we should name and shame everyone here. So there should be a list of top performers and the list of the bad performers. But if the bad performers is Li Ka-shing, there's a bit of a problem there, And then of course the third part was, there's actually, I do LED lighting installation, and we actually installed for a public housing project, Rose Gardens or something in North Point. And it was really, really tough in terms of the budget to install, then to wait for the energy auditor to actually come was a year, and then to finally apply for the money. Whereas I go to Macau, within 2 weeks I have my money, I have my project, and it's all done because the government has a very, very different approach, and it actually subsidizes 80% of the lighting. Because, well, Macau has got money, it needs to spend it somewhere, okay, I'll give that. But it's a little bit more modern type of approach. Here, of course, as everyone knows in Hong Kong, you have that problem of, if I dare do something, something might happen. And if it's associated with me, then there's a problem, right? And that's what I find time and time again whenever I talk to customers, or you probably as well. And that goes with the COP guy was there at that time. And he wouldn't comment on these things, and so it's really down to the regulatory framework is not believed in as an instrument of policy to control. If you touch landlords, man, you're dead, right? So, and then there was an energy consultant there, and she also said what you're saying. If the landlords cannot believe that in a green building you can have 9 to 12% higher yields by saving energy, by actually having less management fee to charge. And then management fees are not listed as a transparent cost. So there's no pressure for you to say, because the policy could be very simple. Management fee, you're allowed to have 10% of your cost for the elevator and 30% for the chiller. And then it has to go down each year by 1%, you have to achieve that goal. That would also, in terms of investment, never push any property developer that much. But again, in hotels and restaurants, it's a different story. And then finally, a lot of the divided property guys, this is what I find. If you're on a 2-year lease, you don't invest. I would like to, I meet many business owners who would like to, and you know, they're small projects. We just want to do a favor, yeah, I'll give you 30 lights, it's okay. Or 200 tubes or whatever. Oh yeah, sorry, my lease runs out next year and the landlord doesn't care, I don't know if I can renew, and if he hikes it up 50%, then, you know, I'm dead. So, or I'm not, I have to take it somewhere and I can't invest into the lighting. So you know, the case is there, but in our case, it's like the visibility and the incentive is really destroyed by this thinking. And then as an approach, if you go to Shenzhen, it's a different story. It's like, yeah, come here. You don't even have to explain anything, just install, it's okay. And I'm just lighting, I'm not, you know, aircon or anything. And they already see a business case there. And then the final part is on LED lighting. You can save another 16% on your aircon because, you know, of the heat dissipated, right? That is the real calculation where say for instance, the W Hotel Songhai, they go, wow, this is amazing, I get a nice return. They have the patience for, like, say, a 2-year return on investment. But everybody else is on 2-year leases. It doesn't work out.
Okay, gentlemen, come on.
One more thing to add. Let's also not forget the electricity tariff issue. In Hong Kong, so many utilities are artificially low in terms of pricing. So, I mean, if you look at it from a perspective of somebody who is looking to make savings, you know, from energy efficiency, it's a much more convincing argument when you're really saving, when the price of electricity is much higher. But one thing I wanted to ask you was, you know, back to the slide where you said about 20% of Asian buildings had smart meters. Was that it?
Yeah.
What is the? I mean, are there growth numbers tied to that? Because I know for responsible investment, for instance, on the financial side, Asia is also quite pathetic when you look at total responsible investment globally, you know, for sustainability issues. But the growth rate is very rapid. So what I'm curious about is what can we see in terms of the growth rate, the uptake of these types of solutions in a place like Hong Kong?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't have the specific figures on that, but the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, they really have some good statistics on that. I know that it's been rapid.
Your comments.
If you go back to the UK and Europe in relation to building control for developing new buildings, if you take it down to residential property, there's building constraint regulations that sit against your R values. Is there any sort of policy within, particularly Hong Kong, for development of new buildings that developers are tied in to meet those parameters within energy efficiency on new developments? And are they governed and taken forward?
There are parameters for energy efficiency in terms of per square foot, for example, for the lighting code. You've got certain lighting requirements that you can't go above, but they're very, very, very easy. So I think that the point is that the bar is not very high, so it's very easy.
Gilbert, that was the point you were making about the building energy efficiency. You know, it's in place, it's statutory, but it's just so easy to meet that it doesn't really achieve anything.
That's right.
Any more? Thank you all. Gilbert, first of all, thank you very much for a very, very interesting presentation. I think it was obvious from the discussion afterwards, and not around the table, that a lot of what you say had a lot of resonance with people around here. I think you produced some interesting thinking about approaches by developers here, government regulatory issues and so on. So thank you for giving us lots to think of. You don't escape that free gift.
Oh, right, okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for coming this morning, and thank you for your participation. It's a good and interesting discussion. Look forward to meeting you at the next Chamber event, and have a good day's business. Thank you very much.